building was already awake before the sun. Lights glowed behind tall glass walls, and the city outside moved fast, loud, and confident. Inside, the air smelled of polished floors and expensive perfume. People in clean suits walked with purpose, holding phones, giving short orders, and barely noticing anything around them that did not belong to their world. In this place, everything had value only if it looked important. The custodian arrived before most of them. He always did. His work began while the city was still half asleep. He wore the same faded uniform every day, clean but old, with a small name patch stitched on the chest that few people ever read. His shoes were worn at the edges, softened by years of walking long halls and quiet rooms. He moved slowly, not because he was lazy, but because he had learned that moving quietly made him invisible. He pushed his cleaning cart through the lobby, careful not to leave marks on the shining floor. The lobby was large, almost too large, with high ceilings and walls decorated with art pieces that cost more than his yearly pay. In the center stood a black grand piano. It was always there, polished and perfect, like a silent promise. Most days it was ignored. Sometimes it was played by guests during events, but never during the early mornings when only echoes lived in the space. The custodian noticed the piano every day. He never touched it. He only glanced at it when no one was looking, the way someone looks at an old photograph they are not sure they are allowed to keep. Music lived quietly inside him, hidden deep under years of responsibility and silence. Once, a long time ago, music had been the loudest thing in his life. He cleaned offices floor by floor. The higher he went, the quieter it became. The top floors belonged to the most powerful people in the building. Doors there were heavy, and the carpets were so soft they swallowed sound. He worked with care, emptying bins, wiping desks, straightening chairs. On the walls were framed awards and photographs of smiling faces shaking hands. Success looked clean and confident from the outside. No one asked him questions. No one wondered where he came from or what he had been before. To most people, he was just part of the background, like the lights or the air conditioning. They greeted him only when they had to, and even then, their eyes often passed right through him. During breaks, he sat alone near a service hallway and drank water from a plastic bottle. He did not scroll through a phone or chat with others. Instead, his mind drifted. Sometimes it drifted to a small room from years ago, with a broken fan and a piano that had seen better days. Sometimes it drifted to nights filled with sound and applause, to hands that moved without fear, guided by something deeper than thought. Life had changed quickly back then. One problem had led to another. Responsibilities had grown heavier. Dreams had become expensive, then impossible. Music slowly moved from the center of his life to a quiet corner. He never blamed anyone for it. Life simply asked for more than he could give at the time. By the time the building became busy, he was almost done. People now filled the halls. Phones rang. Laughter echoed from meeting rooms. Somewhere above, a billionaire was preparing for a charity event that would take place that evening. The building would soon be filled with guests, cameras, and polished smiles. The custodian knew about the event because signs were placed everywhere. Flowers were delivered. Chairs were arranged. The grand piano in the lobby was cleaned again, this time by specialists. Its surface shined like a mirror. Watching them work, the custodian felt something tighten in his chest. He turned away and returned to his tasks. As the day passed, the energy in the building changed. People moved faster. Voices grew louder. Everyone wanted everything to be perfect. The custodian stayed out of the way, doing small tasks wherever he was told. He wiped fingerprints from glass doors and picked up tiny scraps of paper from the floor. No one noticed his effort, but that was normal. In the late afternoon, he stood near the lobby, waiting for instructions. The piano sat quietly under the bright lights, ready to impress. The custodian looked at it longer than he should have. His fingers twitched slightly, a small movement that meant nothing to anyone else. He quickly folded his hands and lowered his eyes. People began to arrive in expensive clothes. Laughter filled the air. The billionaire made his entrance with confidence, surrounded by attention. He spoke loudly, joked easily, and enjoyed being watched. The custodian stepped back, blending into the edge of the room. He had no idea that before the night ended, a careless joke would pull him out of the shadows. He did not know that the piano he had avoided for so long would soon demand his honesty. For now, he was still just the custodian, standing quietly unseen, carrying a story no one had asked to hear. The evening event began smoothly, just as everyone expected. Soft lights filled the lobby, and the building no longer felt like an office. Felt like a stage. Music played quietly from hidden speakers. Guests arrived in waves, greeting each other with smiles that were practiced and confident. Laughter floated through the air, light and careless. The custodian stayed close to the walls. He had been told to remain nearby in case anything needed quick cleaning. He held a cloth in one hand and stood beside his cart, watching without really watching. This world was not his. It never had been. He had learned how to exist near it without touching it. People spoke about money, business deals, and travel plans. Their words sounded important but empty at the same time. They talked loudly, as if silence might make them uncomfortable. The custodian noticed how often they laughed, even when nothing was funny. The grand piano sat in the center of the lobby, shining under the lights. A few guests walked around it, admiring it like a decoration rather than an instrument. Someone joked that it was there only to make the building look cultured. Another guest joked that no one actually knew how to play it properly. That was when the billionaire noticed the custodian standing nearby. It was not a cruel look at first. It was curious, almost playful. The billionaire had been drinking and was enjoying the attention. He liked moments that made people laugh. He liked being the one who controlled the room. Someone pointed at the piano and said it would be funny if someone unexpected tried to play it. Eyes turned. The billionaire followed the direction of the pointing hand. His gaze landed on the custodian. The room grew slightly quieter. The billionaire smiled and raised his voice just enough for others to hear. He made a joke about talent and luck, about dreams and reality. Then, laughing, he said the words that would later be repeated again and again. He said it lightly, like it meant nothing. He said it as if embarrassment was part of the entertainment. Some guests laughed immediately. Others smiled awkwardly. A few people looked away, sensing something uncomfortable in the air. The custodian felt the heat rise to his face. He did not smile. He did not speak. He simply stood there, holding his cloth a little tighter than before. For a moment, no one expected him to move. The joke had already done its job. The room was ready to move on. But then someone else spoke. A younger guest, less polished, encouraged him. Not loudly, not cruelly, just enough to keep the moment alive. Others joined in, some out of curiosity, some out of boredom. The custodian shook his head. He tried to step back. His heart beat fast, not from fear, but from something else he had not felt in years. Something old and familiar. The billionaire laughed again, assuming the hesitation was part of the show. He waved a hand toward the piano. The challenge hung in the air, half joke, half command. The custodian looked at the piano. He saw more than polished wood and ivory keys. He saw long nights, tired fingers, and quiet rooms filled with sound. He also saw failure, sacrifice, and the many reasons he had walked away from music. He thought of how long it had been since his hands had touched a piano like this. He thought of how foolish it might look if he tried and failed. The room was watching now, waiting. Slowly, he stepped forward. The sound of his shoes on the floor felt too loud. Each step carried the weight of eyes and expectations. He reached the piano bench and paused. His hands hovered in the air. The noise in the room softened, not completely, but enough to feel the shift. He sat down carefully. Up close, the piano smelled faintly of polish and wood. It was well cared for, tuned perfectly, ready to sing for anyone who knew how to ask it. His fingers rested on his knees. He took a breath. For a brief second, doubt returned. A voice inside him whispered that he no longer belonged here, that this was a mistake. Then another voice answered, quieter but stronger. It reminded him that music never truly leaves. It waits. He placed his hands on the keys. The first note was soft, almost too soft to hear. A few people leaned in. Someone laughed under their breath, expecting something simple, maybe even wrong. Then the second note followed. Clear. Confident. The custodian's shoulders relaxed slightly. His hands moved again. Slowly at first, then with growing certainty. The sound filled the space, pushing past whispers and unfinished laughter. Conversations stopped. Phones lowered. Eyes turned fully toward the piano. The music was not fast. It was not meant to impress with speed. It was careful and emotional, like a story told honestly. Each note carried weight. Each pause mattered. The custodian forgot the room. He forgot the lights and the people. His body remembered what his mind had tried to bury. His fingers knew where to go. They moved with purpose, guided by years that had never truly been lost. The billionaire's smile slowly faded. He straightened where he stood. This was not what he had expected. The music grew stronger. It filled the high ceiling and echoed softly off the walls. Some guests felt a tightness in their chest without knowing why. Others felt memories rise that they had not thought about in years. The custodian played like someone who had lived, not like someone showing off. The sound carried struggle, hope, and quiet strength. It demanded attention without asking for it. By the time the final notes of the opening section faded, the room was completely silent. No one laughed now. No one spoke. The challenge that had started as a joke had turned into something else entirely. And the custodian was only just beginning. The silence after the opening notes felt heavy, like the room was holding its breath. The custodian did not look up. His eyes stayed on the keys, his focus steady. He knew better than to search for reactions. Music had taught him that the moment you play for approval, you lose the truth of what you are saying. He continued. The melody shifted, growing deeper, more complex. His hands moved with calm confidence now, no longer hesitant. Each note seemed to unlock another memory, another feeling he had kept closed for years. The piano responded warmly, as if it had been waiting for someone like him. People leaned closer without realizing it. The polished smiles faded from their faces. Some crossed their arms, not out of boredom, but because something inside them had tightened. Others felt a sudden urge to sit down, to listen properly, as if standing was no longer enough. The billionaire stood very still. The room no longer belonged to him. He could not control it with words or jokes. The music had taken over, and it did not care about titles or money. The custodian's playing grew more powerful, but never loud for the sake of being loud. It was controlled, thoughtful. He let the quiet moments breathe. Those pauses said as much as the notes themselves. A few guests exchanged looks. This was not luck. This was not someone pressing random keys. This was skill shaped by discipline, by time, by sacrifice. Some felt embarrassed for laughing earlier. Others felt something closer to shame. As the music continued, the custodian's posture changed. His back straightened. His shoulders loosened. The man who usually tried to disappear was gone. In his place sat someone fully present, grounded, and sure of himself. Images passed through his mind as he played. A younger version of himself practicing late into the night. A teacher correcting his posture, demanding patience. Long bus rides with music notes folded in his pocket. Moments of hope, followed by moments of hard truth. He remembered the day he had walked away. The piano keys that had felt heavier than ever. The promise he had made to himself that it would only be for a short time. That short time had turned into years. The music carried all of that. Loss, determination, quiet acceptance, and still, beneath it all, love. Someone in the audience wiped their eyes quickly, hoping no one noticed. Another person let out a slow breath they did not realize they had been holding. The billionaire shifted his weight. He was no longer amused. He was no longer smiling. His face showed confusion mixed with something unfamiliar to him. Respect. The custodian reached a section of the piece that demanded everything from him. His fingers moved faster now, not wildly, but with sharp precision. The sound filled every corner of the lobby. Even people in nearby rooms stopped what they were doing, drawn by the music. No one interrupted. No phones rang. No glasses clinked. The building felt different, as if the walls themselves were listening. As the final notes approached, the custodian slowed again. He allowed the melody to soften, to settle gently instead of ending sharply. He wanted the sound to fade naturally, like a thought finishing itself. The last note lingered in the air, trembling slightly before disappearing. For a moment nothing happened. Then the room exhaled. Applause began quietly, uncertain at first, as if people were not sure whether it was allowed. Then it grew. Hands came together, faster, louder. Some people stood. Others remained frozen, clapping while seated, still processing what they had witnessed. The custodian remained seated. He did not bow. He did not smile widely. He simply rested his hands in his lap, breathing slowly, letting the noise wash over him. The billionaire stepped forward, the sound of applause following him. When he spoke, his voice was lower than before. The humor was gone. He asked where the custodian had learned to play. The question felt heavy, personal. The custodian hesitated. This part was harder than playing. Music was honest, but words required explanation. He answered simply. He said he had studied long ago. He said life had taken him in a different direction. There was a murmur in the room. People leaned in again, hungry for the story behind the sound. Someone asked why he had stopped. The custodian paused. He chose his words carefully. He did not speak of bitterness or regret. He spoke of responsibility, a family, of doing what was necessary at the time. The billionaire listened closely. For the first time that evening, he was not thinking about how others saw him. He was thinking about the man in front of him. He apologized. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough for those nearby to hear. He said the joke had been careless. The room went quiet again, but this silence was different. It was respectful. The custodian nodded once. He did not hold onto the apology. He did not need to. What mattered was that he had been heard. A few guests approached him, offering praise, asking questions. He answered politely but briefly. Attention still felt strange to him. He was not sure where to place it. As the event slowly returned to motion, the custodian stood up from the piano. His legs felt slightly weak, not from fear, but from release. He stepped away, ready to return to his corner. But something had changed. People looked at him differently now. They made space when he passed. They nodded with genuine acknowledgement. The billionaire watched him go, deep in thought. The words spoken earlier echoed in his mind. He realized the challenge had never truly been about the piano. It had been about seeing. And for the first time that night, the custodian felt visible. He returned to his cart, his cloth still folded neatly where he had left it. The music still rang softly in his ears. He did not know what would happen next. He did not expect anything. But as he looked back once more at the piano, he felt something he had not felt in a very long time. Possibility. The event did not end when the applause faded. In many ways, it had only just begun. The lobby slowly returned to movement, but the energy was different now. Conversations were quieter. Laughter sounded softer. People spoke with more care, as if afraid to break something fragile that had appeared in the room. The custodian stayed near his cart, unsure of what to do next. Normally, this was the moment when he would fade back into the background, cleaning unnoticed as the night moved forward. But tonight eyes followed him, not with judgment, but with curiosity and something close to admiration. A few guests approached him one by one. They told him the music was beautiful. They said it reminded them of their childhood, or of someone they loved. He nodded and thanked them politely. He did not know how to respond beyond that. Praise felt heavy in his hands, like something he was not trained to carry. The billionaire remained nearby, watching quietly. He did not interrupt. He did not make jokes. He simply observed the man he had nearly humiliated only an hour earlier. The image did not fit the story he usually told himself about people like the custodian. That realization unsettled him. As the night continued, the building staff moved around preparing refreshments and adjusting lights. The custodian tried to help where he could, but more than once, Someone told him to rest for a moment. That had never happened before. He felt awkward, standing still while others worked. Later, the billionaire finally approached him again. This time, there was no audience gathered closely. The moment felt private, even though others were nearby. He asked the custodian to sit. The request was gentle, not commanding. The custodian hesitated, then agreed. They sat a short distance apart, the piano between them like a quiet witness. The billionaire spoke carefully. He said he had spent years believing that success always showed itself clearly. He admitted that he had been wrong. He said talent did not always arrive dressed in confidence or status. The custodian listened. He did not interrupt. He had learned long ago that listening was safer than speaking. The billionaire asked more about his past, about where he had learned to play, about what had pulled him away from music. The questions were sincere now, not playful. The custodian answered slowly. He spoke of training that had demanded discipline, of teachers who pushed him hard, of moments when he believed music would be his life. He also spoke of illness in the family, of responsibilities that could not be ignored, of choices that had to be made quickly. He did not blame anyone. He did not speak with bitterness. He simply told the truth as he remembered it. The billionaire nodded, absorbing each word. For someone used to solving problems with money, this story did not offer an easy solution. That frustrated him, but it also humbled him. He asked why the custodian had never returned to music. The answer was simple. Life had kept moving. One job led to another. Time passed faster than expected. Music became something he carried quietly instead of something he lived openly. There was a pause between them. The noise of the event filled the space, but it felt distant. The billionaire then asked a question that surprised the custodian. He asked if he still wanted to play. The custodian did not answer right away. Wanting and believing were two different things. He said he did not know. He said he had not allowed himself to think about it in a long time. The billionaire did not push. He simply said that opportunities had a strange way of appearing when people were honest. As the conversation ended, the custodian returned to his duties. But his steps felt different, lighter yet unsure. The building that once felt cold and distant now felt almost familiar. Later that night, after most guests had left, the custodian cleaned the lobby again. Cups were collected. Chairs were moved. The piano sat quietly under dimmer lights. He paused in front of it. No one was watching now. He placed a hand gently on its surface, not to play, just to feel the smooth wood. The moment felt personal, like a quiet promise made to himself. As he worked, he thought about how easily a life could be misunderstood. How quickly people decided who mattered and who did not. He wondered how many others carried hidden talents, waiting for a moment of courage or chance. In another part of the building, the billionaire stood alone in his office, looking out over the city. The lights below seemed smaller than usual. He replayed the evening in his mind, especially the laughter at the beginning. For the first time in a long while, success did not feel as satisfying as it once had. He realized that power without awareness could be careless. That respect, once lost, was difficult to regain. The night ended quietly. The custodian finished his shift and changed out of his uniform. As he stepped outside, the city air felt cooler, different. He walked home as he always did, but his thoughts were louder than the streets around him. The sound of the piano followed him, not as noise, but as a reminder. He did not know what tomorrow would bring. No promises had been made. No contracts signed. Nothing had been fixed or guaranteed. But something inside him had shifted. The door he had closed years ago was no longer locked. And for the first time in a very long time, he considered the possibility that music might still be waiting for him. Morning came sooner than expected. The custodian woke before his alarm, the sound of the piano still moving gently through his thoughts. He lay still for a moment, listening to the quiet of his small room. Nothing around him had changed. The walls were the same. The light through the window was the same. Yet something inside him felt different, unsettled in a hopeful way. He went through his routine carefully. He washed his face, dressed, and prepared for work as he always had. But his hands moved with more awareness, as if they belonged to someone who had remembered an important part of himself. At the building, people greeted him differently. Some smiled with recognition. Others nodded with respect. A few stopped him to say they had not been able to stop thinking about the music. He thanked them quietly and continued working, unsure how to carry this new version of himself through familiar halls. Later that day, he was asked to stop by an office near the upper floors. The request made his stomach tighten. He had learned to expect problems when called upstairs, but this time felt different. The billionaire was there, standing near a window. He turned when the custodian entered and invited him to sit again. There was no rush in his voice. He spoke honestly. He said the music had stayed with him. He said it had reminded him of why he once loved art, before success had turned everything into numbers and results. He admitted that the joke from the night before had been careless, and that he wanted to make things right, not through words but through action. He offered help. Not money handed over thoughtlessly, but time, space, and access. He spoke of practice rooms, of meeting people who understood music deeply, of chances to perform again if the custodian wished. The custodian listened in silence. The offer sounded unreal, almost dangerous. Hope could be painful when it rose too quickly. He asked for time to think. The billionaire respected that. He said there was no pressure. The choice had to belong fully to the custodian, or it would mean nothing. That night, the custodian walked home slowly. He thought about the life he had built. It was modest but stable. Music, once invited back in, might demand more than he could give. It might reopen wounds he had carefully closed. At home, he found an old notebook hidden in a drawer. Inside were handwritten notes, music sketches, and reminders from another life. The pages were yellowed, but the writing was steady. He traced the lines with his fingers and felt the familiar pull. He sat quietly for a long time, then opened the notebook fully. He played through the music in his head, note by note, remembering how it felt to chase perfection without fear. The next day, he agreed to visit one of the practice rooms. The room was simple and quiet, with a well-maintained piano and soft lighting. No audience, no pressure, just space. He sat down and began slowly, testing his hands, listening carefully. Some movements felt stiff. Others came back instantly, as if they had been waiting. He practiced for hours, stopping often, correcting himself, learning again how to be patient. There were moments of frustration, moments when doubt whispered that it was too late. But there were also moments of joy, small ones, honest ones. Over the following days, word spread quietly, not as gossip but as respect. People spoke about the custodian who played with heart. Invitations came carefully, never demanding. Small gatherings, quiet rooms, listeners who truly wanted to hear. He performed again for a small group one evening. The applause was gentle but sincere. No cameras, no jokes, just appreciation. The billionaire attended from the back, saying nothing, allowing the music to stand on its own. As weeks passed, the custodian balanced work and practice. It was exhausting, but fulfilling. His days felt full in a new way. He slept better. He walked straighter. One evening, he was asked if he would consider playing at a public event. Larger than before. Open to anyone who wished to listen. The idea frightened him. He remembered the laughter, the challenge, the risk. He asked himself a simple question. Not whether he could succeed, but whether he would regret refusing. The answer was clear. He agreed. Preparation began quietly. No dramatic announcements. Just work. He chose music that reflected his journey. Pieces that carried honesty rather than show. As the date approached, doubts returned. He worried about failing. About being judged again. About stepping into a world that might not fully accept him. The billionaire noticed the fear and spoke gently. He reminded him that the night of the joke had already been survived. Everything after that was courage. On the day of the event, the custodian arrived early. The hall was larger than the lobby, the piano brighter under the lights. He stood alone for a moment, breathing deeply. He thought about where he had started. About the quiet mornings. About the uniform. about being unseen. When he sat at the piano, he did not feel small. The room filled with people. The lights dimmed. Silence returned. And when he began to play, he knew that whatever happened next, the choice to return to music had already changed his life. The hall felt larger once it filled with people. Rows of chairs stretched farther than the custodian expected, and the lights above the stage glowed softly, warm but revealing. He stood just off to the side, listening to the low sound of voices settling into silence. His hands were steady, though his chest felt tight. Not with fear exactly, but with the weight of meaning. He took a slow breath and walked toward the piano. The bench waited where it always did, simple and unassuming. He sat, adjusted his position, and rested his hands for a moment. He did not rush. He had learned that rushing was another way of hiding. Tonight, he wanted to be present. The room grew quiet in a way that felt respectful. No whispers, no laughter, just attention. He began to play. The opening notes were gentle, familiar to him, shaped by long practice and careful choice. The sound moved outward, touching the walls, settling into the space. People leaned forward without thinking. Some closed their eyes. Others watched his hands, surprised by how calm they looked. As the music continued, it grew richer, layered with emotion that felt earned rather than forced. It carried echoes of early mornings, of empty halls, of unseen effort. It also carried hope, steady and honest. He did not try to impress. He told the truth through sound. The audience listened deeply, not as spectators but as witnesses. The music invited them in, offering something shared rather than performed at them. In the stillness, time felt slower, kinder. Near the back, the billionaire stood quietly, hands folded. He did not seek attention. He did not smile for approval. He listened, truly listened, and felt a rare sense of humility settle over him. The custodian reached the heart of the piece, where the melody rose and fell like a breath held and released. His fingers moved with confidence shaped by patience. The piano answered fully, alive beneath his touch. A memory passed through him of the night in the lobby, the careless laughter, the challenge spoken without thought. He let it pass. That moment no longer defined him. It had only opened a door. The final section approached. He slowed slightly, allowing space between notes, trusting silence to do its work. The last note rang out, clear and steady, then faded. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the room stood. Applause rose, not sudden or wild, but strong and sustained. Felt less like noise and more like recognition. The custodian remained seated, breathing slowly, letting the sound reach him without overwhelming him. When he finally stood, he did not bow deeply. He simply nodded once, a small gesture of thanks. Afterward, people approached him quietly. They spoke of how the music made them feel seen, how it reminded them of paths they had set aside. He listened more than he spoke. That felt right. Later, in a quieter room, the billionaire thanked him. Not for the performance alone, but for the lesson. He said that success had taught him many things, but not enough about attention or care. He said he would remember that. The custodian accepted the words without ceremony. He had learned that respect, when offered honestly, did not need to be debated. In the weeks that followed, life found a new rhythm. The custodian continued working, but his days now held music as well. Practice became a daily act of grounding. Performances came occasionally, chosen with intention rather than pressure. He did not become famous overnight. That had never been the goal. What changed was simpler and deeper. He felt aligned with himself again. The building no longer felt like a place he passed through unseen. Felt like one chapter among many. Sometimes, in the early mornings, he played quietly in an empty room, letting the sound greet the day. The billionaire made changes of his own. Events became more thoughtful. Voices were invited from unexpected places. The piano in the lobby was no longer decoration. It was used, respected, and heard. People remembered the story not as a joke, but as a reminder. They spoke about the night they learned how easily talent could be overlooked, and how quickly humility could change a room. As for the custodian, He learned to carry possibility without fear. He learned that beginnings could happen later than expected, and that dignity did not depend on titles. One evening, after a small performance, he walked home under quiet streetlights. The city felt familiar and new at the same time. He thought about the path that had brought him here, the choices made, the doors closed and opened again. He did not wish to rewrite the past. It had shaped the music he now played. At home, he placed his notebook back in the drawer, no longer hidden, just resting. He knew it would be there when he needed it. The story did not end with a promise or a dramatic reward. It ended with something better, a life lived honestly, and a reminder that sometimes, all it takes is one moment of courage for the quietest voice in the room to be heard.